Welcome to the Art of Advocacy. I'm your host, Dr. Sheldon L. Akins. By the way, if you listen to podcasts, hopefully you listen to the podcast show Leading Equity. It comes out every Monday, but we go live every Thursday. The Art of Advocacy. I'm excited for today's topic. I'm going to be talking about decentering and what does that mean? Some anti-racist practices that we can do. We'll share some personal stories. I have a good friend of mine, Melanie, is here, and so we'll be talking about that. As always, you know I got to do it. I'm going to remind you, our show is sponsored by the upcoming book, Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students. Listen, we are about, let's see, comes out, if you order it on Amazon, you order it online at your online retailer, should get it at your house July 20th. So we're 3 weeks or so away from that date. By the way, if you want to be a part of the Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students book club, then all you got to do, shoot me an email with proof of purchase, your receipt or something like that. Just let me know that you did grab the book, and I will add you to the list. We have some really good stuff coming up to discuss the book. By the way, also one more thing I'm going to add on to this, because I'm excited about this news here. I'm going to share this with y'all because y'all are my avid listeners, and I think it's fair that you learn about this. Now, I will be recording the audio version of the book as well. I told my publisher, I said, listen, a lot of the folks, they listen to the show, they are used to hearing my voice. It makes sense if I wrote the book to be able to read the book. So I don't know when it will come out. I haven't even scheduled the recordings yet. So I'm excited to do that. I'll be driving down to Salt Lake City, which is about 2.5 hours from where I live, to do the audio recording in a professional studio. I'm really excited about that. But if you're an Audible person, because I know I'm one of those people, I just got done reading or listening to Ratchetdemic by Dr. Chris Emden. I just finished that this week. I try to read a book or listen to a book, once or twice a month. And so it was nice listening to his voice as he read his book. And so I'm looking forward to that opportunity. So if you need some more information, you can look right there. There is a little scanned QR code right there in the corner of the screen there. Scan that. That'll give you more information on the book. Now, for today's special guest, Melanie is here. I'm going to read you just like a sentence or two of the bio, and then we'll get into it. By the way, I see if you're out there, I see Elizabeth is out there as well. Hello to you. If anybody else just want to say hello, that'll be great. Just send a shout out, but thank you so much for joining us today. Melanie has been the elementary writing and social studies coordinator in Simsbury, Connecticut since 2012. With that position, she develops curriculum and assessments, coaches teachers, and works with students to send them off into the world as confident, competent writers who love to express their ideas. So, without further ado, welcome, Melanie, to the show. We're glad to have you on.
That is a welcome. Thanks for having me. I feel like such a fangirl being here. I've spent so much time listening to you. I didn't say backstage that I can't wait for your book to come out. I have that on pre-order. I was going to ask you and say to you, it's tomorrow's July. When's it coming?
It's coming out in 3 weeks.
July, huh? All right. So I'll keep it on the wait list. So excited for that.
So yeah. How are you doing? How has your week been? This is going to be a long weekend. You got any plans?
I do. You know what? Tomorrow is my last real day of work. We've had the Simsbury Writing Academy this week, so we are still in it. I've got 48 kids who have signed up and are there writing every morning and excited about doing it. And tomorrow's their last day, and it is my time to go, I'm ready to decompress. It's been a long year.
I hear you on that. Well, sounds like a much needed break is coming up for you. So Melanie, I know who you are, but I would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm listening to. I'm like, yeah, I have been doing that writing and social studies coordinatorship for a while, and it has. I feel like it doesn't really tap into all that we do, but it's getting there. I end up knowing a lot about the reading curriculum too, and working really hard to find opportunities that um, really tap into what kids care about and make things not only um, relevant but inspiring for them. So I work really hard to do that. I also work really hard to make sure that I share the resources that I have to help other teachers teach writing well. I love to write. I have my MFA in creative writing, and I have a few novels that maybe someday I'll get to. I seem to keep writing about writing. Um, but I would welcome anybody to come and write with us at Two Writing Teachers, where I blog. That's kind of a big deal in my life right now. And yeah, that's some more about me.
Good. Now I see you're in Simsbury. No, you got to tell me where is that at? Only place I know is New Haven, so you got to tell me a little bit more.
We're about an hour from New Haven. We're 10 minutes north of Hartford. So
Okay,
um, kind of in the middle.
kind of
Yeah.
in the middle. Kind of in the middle. Okay,
Kind of
and
in
now
the
you're
middle. We're number one for bears in the state. We get a lot of bears.
okay. Okay. Now, Granny Fanny says we love that you
Oh,
write
thanks,
about
Granny
writing.
Franny. I
Thank you, Granny Fanny. Now, and that's a pretty Granny Franny, cool name. I like that, by the way.
do, yeah.
Now, what I think it's something that you left off, at least maybe you said it, but I didn't hear it. You have some books as well, right? So why don't you share a little bit about your authorship?
I write about writing, yeah. So I was probably because of Two Writing Teachers, I was asked by a couple different publishers to write reviews of books that were coming out, or not even write reviews, evaluate proposals.
Mm.
And I started doing that and getting to know some editors. And I had an editor say to me a few years ago, "When are you going to write a book?" I was like, "Write a book? That seems like a big task."
Yeah.
Um, but I started to write a book. And um, so my first book came out in 2019, and that was Every Child Can Write. And I feel like that one I really gave everything I had. Like, that was like, here are all the tricks I've got that I've been working on for 20 years. And here you go. Here's everything I've learned. Um, and then COVID hit. So it kind of didn't get the energy I wish it had, but I keep hoping it'll pick up again.
Yeah.
And then Kelsey Storm was a co-writer at Two Writing Teachers, and the two of us put our heads together, and we did a lot of that and a lot of brainstorming, and we ended up writing The Responsive Writing Teacher, which of the three books I would say is the most founded on equity. I
Mhm.
would say they all are, because they're all three are really looking to make sure that all kids learn to write. Um, but that particular one really looks at the different ways you can know kids,
Okay.
and then what you can do with that knowledge. So that was the second one that came out in the middle of the pandemic. So, make sure you hit just before the
Yeah.
pandemic and then hit the middle of the pandemic. Um, and my newest book just came out, and this one's part of a series. So it was more of a structured, here are the biggest questions that we think you might have about teaching various subjects. And mine is about teaching elementary writing. So um, my hope is that that helps people who are sort of going, like, I don't see myself as a writer, even though they probably do write a lot if they sit down and really think about their life. Like, you write lists, letters, notes, emails. You do write. So
Yeah.
anyway, yes, I have those books, and right now I'm not percolating anymore. I'm taking
You're done for now. Well,
yeah,
congrats.
slowly.
I'm excited about my first book, so I want to be like you when I grew up. So that's good for you to have so many books out. I always tell people, it's like I podcast for a reason because I just don't. It's just writing. It's just hard for me to do, just to sit there and I'm so focused on making sure like I'm not misspelling stuff. So I'll type something, I see it turn red, and I'm like backtracking, and then I'm trying to redo it again, and then I lose my
Gotta turn your
thought.
notifications off, Sheldon.
I know. I just lose my thought, and I'm just all over the place. Just sitting down trying to get those things done was tough. So I'm this book right here. I definitely put everything into that because it was just like, man, this is not something I would normally do on my own time. Just because I just prefer to just podcast and hold a conversation with someone as opposed to writing stuff down. So good for you. Writing
Yeah.
about writing. I should probably read your books as well for more inspiration the next time I get ready to write a book.
Well, good for you also. I think, we appreciate the loneliness and the vulnerability of it, right? And
Yeah.
it's out there and I can't change another thing. And oh my gosh, there are some things I wish I could.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, let's get into today's topic. We're going to be talking about decentering, and I want us to set the tone. So I'm gonna throw out the first question, which is basically, what does it mean to decenter, and why do you think it's so important?
right. So, in the presentation that I had done for your show a year ago, talked about three different ways of decentering, but really what it's addressing and what it's looking at is the um, sort of disproportionate space that I feel like I get to take being a white woman. And um, how do I push myself to really think about how do I share that space? How do I create resources to make sure that uh, other people feel as comfortable as I do or as comfortable as they possibly can in the spaces that I have responsibility for? And as somebody who is designing curriculum and coaching instruction for an entire school system, I touch a lot of lives. And I want to make sure that the lives that I touch feel as validated in the spaces where they find themselves as I do. And that seems like a really big thing to think about.
Yeah.
It's that consideration of other people's perspectives and the stories that they're bringing and the things that matter to them that I make sure I honor as much as I possibly can because
I,
I feel like I get pretty honored.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point when it comes to decentering. When we think historically about how our educational system has been set up, and I mean what's considered like the classics, when you think about reading and writing, language arts, those kind of courses, Shakespeare is often one of the ones. You got who's the one that wrote Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer? Yeah,
Mark
yeah, all
Twain.
so all those kind of books are still being taught in the classroom, and it's unfortunate now that okay, so we started shifting, and a lot of teachers were bringing in more diverse books, but then you get all these book bans. So it's like a lot of teachers are trying to decenter the quote unquote traditional forms of education and teaching, but then there's all this pushback when it comes to okay, teachers of color, I'm sorry, authors of color, and then like the content, if there's some LGBTQ references into a book, then that sometimes gets challenged, and it's hard to decenter these days. So I am glad that you're in a position where you can support educators who are in their roles and really help them out with decentering. I have a question, Melanie, because I don't know how long you've been on this journey when it comes to doing this equity work, but why did decentering, like at what point did it get, start to become important to you?
I wish I could tell you the moment. There
Mhm.
have been a lot of people who have asked me that, and thanks, Fran. The chat's, the chat's a little distracting.
Okay, okay. I won't put them up while you're talking. I get
Before
distracted
I
too.
answer that, I want to hold on to the question, but I want to go
Mhm,
back to something that you just said because it's an important distinction for me.
mhm.
And I really have worked hard to say to people, please don't call them diverse books, call them
Okay.
inclusive books, because it's diverse to who? And just
Mm.
just thinking about that, I'm like, we're not talking about diverse books, we're talking about inclusive books. I want to
Yeah.
make sure that there are books that include the whole group of people and beyond that who are in the classroom reading them. So I work pretty hard to make that distinction for people and talk about that. I think it's a really important one. And I think it came up when I was working at getting my MFA, when we were
Mhm.
talking about those, when we were having those conversations in that program. Um, but anyway, getting back to what brought on this thinking, I don't have a great milestone moment
Okay.
that I can say this was it. Um, I grew up with my friend Wendy, who
Uh-huh.
I actually dedicated the responsive writing teacher to, and she is married to a black man. She was married to a black man. They're divorced, but she has two sons who are exactly my daughter's ages, and we would talk about the different experiences that my daughters had and her kids had.
Mhm.
And that was the first time I started thinking about the challenges that she had and the challenges that existed for um, people who were, in their case, biracial. And their challenges were twofold because they felt like they didn't fit in with black people and they didn't fit in with white people, that black people could see that they weren't black, but white people looked at them and they were black.
Mhm.
So Wendy and I had those conversations, and those were the first conversations that I remember really having about race and talking about that. Um,
You
and
were an
then
adult at that time?
as an adult,
Before you
didn't
started having, you're not the first white person to tell me that we didn't have these kind of conversations until I was later on in life. Why
didn't have
it
those
just wasn't talked about at
conversations.
home?
Did what?
I said it just what race wasn't talked about at home?
Wasn't talked about at home. And I grew up in a pretty liberal home,
Mhm.
um, where we would have talked about race if we thought about talking about race. It wasn't avoided, it wasn't thought about. And I'm kind of horrified to say that, like, because it is so obvious now.
Yeah.
Um,
But I wonder if that's still typical because, like I said, you're not I could count on, like, if I had $1 for every time I spoke to a white person, they said, you know what, growing up, race we didn't talk about it. Or I'll have some folks that'll say, not even just race, but or maybe I could tell, black and white and brown, all these different colors and different races. However, I didn't recognize anything about privilege until I became an adult and I started having friends of color who weren't, like, we would be in the same place, but their experiences would be different than my experiences. So it just seems like, I wonder if today, 2022, especially with the political climate and everything that we have going on, if these kind of conversations are happening more in our white homes. For me, growing up, I always knew who I was. I hung out who I hung out with, and I was very mindful of racism from early age all the way through. So I just find that pretty interesting these days.
I think they're happening more.
Hmm.
They're certainly happening in my house. Uh, One of my daughters was making comments earlier, and um, she is 20. She's the one who's 22, and boy, does she talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, and there weren't classes about it in college, and there are now.
Mhm.
So I think in that sense, we've made progress. I mean, um, all four of my daughters have had classes about it and talked about it. So they're talking about it with their peers much more than I ever did. Um, I had a friend when I was in college who was from Hartford, and he was from the north end of Hartford, and he was a very big black man, and we worked in the cafeteria together. And I remember saying to him when I was 21,
Mhm.
um, why can't I go to the north end of Hartford? What's it like there? Like, what's my problem there? And he looked at me and he laughed. And I distinctly remember him saying, "You just don't go there." Like, like he didn't explain it to me. He didn't have more to say about it, but that was what he said. And I remember that distinctly. But I didn't
How did you
push.
take that? Like, what is that? How did that, like, when he said, "Don't you just don't go there," like, how did you feel, like, when he said that? It like, what kinda emotions did it bring?
I went and did my student teaching
Uh-huh,
there as soon as I could. I mean, there was a little bit of I'm going there, like,
uh-huh,
um, but also nervousness. Like, okay, like it must be bad, and that was the word on the street about it,
mhm,
if you will. It was um, talk about building your implicit bias, right?
mhm,
If you drove through the north end of Hartford, you locked your car,
wow,
and it's just it's funny when I think like I was much safer in that neighborhood probably even then than they'd be safe in my neighborhood coming here now.
yeah.
So
So, okay, so you do your student teaching, so you've heard all these rumors, right? North End of Hartford is a certain way, you don't go there, and then you do your student teaching there. Was your experience doing the student teaching, was it what you like, was it true what you heard? I mean, what was your perceptions from working out there?
no, but I wasn't there long, and it was
Uh-huh.
funny. I was there for half of the semester, um, and I loved it, and I loved connecting with the kids. And then I was in Simsbury for the second half of the semester, and then I ended up teaching at an on-ground school for residential kids,
Mhm.
where we had kids of all different colors. And what I'd really love to do is go back and just be like, how could I have done that better, you guys? Like, um, because, again, as you know better, you do better. But I don't think that I worked nearly as hard as I should have to understand those
Sure.
kids.
Sure. I understand. I always say, as a individual who has, had all kind of experiences in education and personal experiences, those kind of things, just a learning, just part of learning. It's a process. 6 years ago, well, I would say even 4 years ago, before I even started the show, I was again, I didn't know a lot of terminology. I knew what racism was because I had experienced it, but I didn't know what a lot of other outside of that. I knew what racism was, but I didn't know what like implicit bias and all and culture responsive teaching, all these things. I didn't know a lot of terms and I just didn't have all that knowledge yet. So I think we just all, when we look back years ago, it's like, man, this is where I was and here I am now. And again, I'm not there. I'm still just striving to get to a certain place. But I think that makes sense. I want to ask you a question, Melanie, because you got my gears turning when I mentioned the diverse books, and I told you I would love for you to share a little bit more as far as your conversation with that individual regarding diverse, saying the term diverse when it comes to books versus inclusive. Because I'm just, I think it's an interesting concept, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, I think we're talking about centering, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So if we are centering, then to say that the books are diverse is to say that they're diverse, and the implication is that they're diverse to me,
Mm.
or that I'm the norm. It's almost like Dove commercials and no, for normal to dark skin,
Yeah.
or like band-aids and what color they
Mhm.
are. Like, it's color, the normal color for who? And so it's really about that. It's thinking, okay, if you're saying that we're going to diversify our book collection, your vision of diversifying the book collection might be very different than my version of diversifying the book collection. You might see things that I don't see that you need, and you might see them being already inclusive, and I might not.
Mm.
So inclusive feels like a word that encompasses everybody. Diversifying feels like a word that centers somebody.
Mm. I could see that. That makes sense. I'd love to. I'm going to do some research on that because that's an interesting concept that I had not come across. Because when I think about diverse books, I see where you're coming from. Like, okay, so are we saying that, okay, I go in my school's library and most of the authors that wrote these books are white. And so then we tend to say, oh, we need to have more diverse books in our library, which would say, okay, we're still centering whiteness maybe, and now we need to bring in folks of color. So then now we have a diverse book collection, versus being inclusive, just saying, we have books that touch on all types of topics written by all types of people who have all types of identities, and that can be intersectional as well. And so here's our library. So that's a very interesting concept. So I appreciate you. I'm working it out in my head as I'm talking, So that's new to me. Like I said, I'm always learning. I'm always learning.
I think that vocabulary and words are so important in this work.
Mm-hmm.
And what I choose to use, how I use words is it's a huge deal. And you think it's not, and then it is. And I just had to really catch myself even in the last sentence to use the word I, and we were talking about it earlier,
Yeah.
as opposed to we. Like we, if I said we are all working on our language and whatever, that implies that people are, and I don't know that they are. I don't want to imply anything. I'm working on it. I think it's important. Um, and I work really hard to use we when I really mean we.
Mhm.
um, we are on this show together.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I
so
struggle with the I and we. I was on an interview earlier today and I mentioned we, and then I was like, oh, no, not we. I'm just saying folks have done this, but not me. So I know what you mean. I'm aware of it. It's just it's been my common language through so long that I really have to be mindful of what I'm saying and try to remember, okay, this is not a we statement. This is more like I or some other folks did this or blah blah blah. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um
yeah,
when we're thinking about some more decentering thoughts that I might have is, I think about, and I mentioned this to you before we started recording, was, sometimes I'll share a story, uh, personal story, maybe an experience that I had. I remember I was at my old job and I was coming in. I was like, man, I got pulled over by the police, and I didn't like the way it happened, or I didn't do anything wrong, wasn't speeding or anything, and I'm just upset. I really felt like they were jacking with, messing with me. And then one of my colleagues who's white jumped in and said, oh, well, I had this experience. My husband is a firefighter and I got pulled over, and I know I got pulled over because my husband was a firefighter and they have a firefighter sticky on the back of her window. And she said, so I was like sitting there thinking, so everybody jumped onto her conversation, and I was just like, wow, she just one up me. Why do you have to one up me? Like, racism versus someone not liking the firefighters, and so they pulled, if that's how you feel, that they pulled you over because uh you know I don't know, I didn't know there was some sort of beef between them or whatever. But my thing was, this was, my moment. This is something I'm trying to express. I'm kind of emotional about this, and I'm sharing my thoughts, and this is my experience. And then someone else jumps in and shares their story, which is not the same experience at all, yet they felt like that was their space or their time to jump in. That's what I often think about when it comes to decentering. It's just like, you're so used to being able to have this space and jumping into these conversations, but when I try to express myself, I don't want the attention to go from myself to you because of your experience that has nothing to do with this related that has nothing to do with this conversation. Do you have any thoughts regarding like decentering in that capacity?
I think it's like we're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And having this conversation and hearing your perception of that situation will make me a better advocate when when a situation like that happens and I can give that person space, because it will happen. Like, I'll be in a situation and I will need to work on catching myself and making sure that I give full time and space and emotional energy to the story that I'm hearing. And I am sorry that that person didn't give you that, because they should have. And it's a practice that I'm working on, and trying to be better, and I get better listening to your stories and going on a walk and reflecting on it and thinking, okay, so when did I screw up last and how can I not the next time?
Yeah. I learned about, I remember reading White Fragility, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and there's a part in the book where she talks about white women's tears, and she mentions about, like, there was a woman of color that shared a story, and then a white woman jumped in afterwards and started crying, and then everybody went over to console the white woman, and then the black woman is sitting there like, yo, like, what just happened? What just happened? So I learned a lot from that book. I really enjoyed reading the book. I mean, I know people have their thoughts on it, but I read that one and also read Nice Racism. I think both of them were really good books. But it just kind of reminds me of those type of situations. Like, we can't have just a 5-minute conversation without it jumping to someone else, and then again those tears come out, and then everyone's running over to console, giving big hugs, and I feel so guilty that these things have happened, and like, that still is not your space in that situation. And just, I don't know, I just those it just like I said, it just brought a lot of awareness to me, and just not something I had ever considered or thought about, because that's just an experience that a lot of us have, but I didn't know that that was actually a term or something like that.
That it was something, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I- if people can't get through all of White Fragility, she's got it's not a TED talk, but you can watch her talk about it on
Mhm.
on YouTube, and it's powerful. I
I
don't
didn't
know
know that.
but yeah, there's maybe 10-minute video where she talks about it, and it's great.
Nice.
Um,
I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm definitely gonna look that up. Now, I want to know about, like, some of the practices that you do. So, in your role, as a coach, what are some, like, kind of walk us through some of your approaches to working with educators? Let's just say it's a first year teacher, and they're fresh. First year teacher, you know how we are. We're fresh, or you know how folks can be when they come out of teacher trainings, and you're all theory based. Okay, I need to do this, and this. What are some of your strategies for working with brand new teachers when it comes to decentering?
you know, we talked about in the presentation, we were thinking about 3 different ways, if you will.
Mhm.
But I think certainly one of the ways is to make sure that they know where to come up with resources. I don't want to ever presuppose or assume that I know where people are on their journey of
Mhm.
becoming an anti-racist educator and a culturally responsive educator. But what I do want them to know is that being a culturally responsive educator isn't just about having multicultural books in their classroom, and it's not just about having different colored crayons in their classroom. Then it's really about, are we closing the educational gap, and are we inspiring and engaging all of the kids in the room? And so, you know one of my favorite coaches, who's like I study, is Diane Sweeney, and she wrote Student Centered Coaching. So if I look at the kids in the classroom, and this is for experienced educators and new educators. I'm just looking at the glare on the screen. That's better, right?
Yeah.
The sun keeps moving. Sorry. This is where we need it to be a podcast, and you could just edit that part out, and we'd
Take
be
it out.
fine live. Um, but Diane Sweeney really gets us looking at kids.
Mhm.
So if I'm looking at kids and what kids are doing, then I can work hard at making suggestions that are meaningful to the teacher, whether it's a new teacher or whether it's an experienced teacher. And if kids aren't engaged, and if kids aren't growing, and if kids aren't inspired by what's happening, then we can take a look at that and we can make some changes so that they are. So that's one place to go. I work really hard to make sure that they have a variety of books. That was the second big thing about decentering. What do we look for when we look at books? And how can we push our practice to think about the books that we're using in front of kids? Are kids seeing themselves? Is there representation? And am I making sure that the books that they're using are also written by what I would call own voices?
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't enough that there are books that feature Black characters. I don't want it to be those books that I've written. I want it to be a book that a Black author wrote. I can't write what Renee Watson writes. I don't have that perspective. I don't have that lived experience. And that lived experience is key. So I want to make sure that that teacher knows to be looking for those, and I have those provided. I have like big collections of mentor texts with different craft moves that I'll sit down and I'll talk to the teacher about and show them how they can use it so that at least they can push that practice. But not mostly, but in addition, I want them to be thinking about, are all of the kids in my classroom learning? And if they are thinking about that and really taking that on and digging into what kids are doing and how they're interacting with instruction and each other, not even just the numbers of standardized tests and data, they matter, but the authenticity of learning. Our kids feeling the dopamine surge of like, yes, I got that and I figured something out and it was exciting and I did it. I want to have those conversations with new teachers. Like, how are
Okay.
you making learning exciting for kids?
Do you get any pushback at all when you have these kind of conversations?
Not those no, not those.
Okay.
It gets really hard for teachers to push back when the conversation's about kids,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
If I bring it to the our kids learning, our kids excited about learning, what's holding them back, then the conversations tend to not have pushback.
Okay.
Um, the pushback could start with behavior problems, like, that will, what if there's behavior problems and they're blaming kids. My favorite thing to say though at that point is, what can the kid do?
Yeah.
Okay, so what can they do? Like, all right, like what are the good things? What do you know about that kid?
So from
Uh,
an asset approach, because I could imagine, like, as if you're teaching writing, oh, the child can't hold their pencil correctly, or
you get a
they
lot of
haven't
they
learned.
can't do this.
hmm
Hmm.
So when you tell them what can they do, does their demeanor change? Does that conversation kind of turn more positive? I mean, kind of,
Hmm.
how does that normally go?
It gets more reflective. It
Okay.
it's easier sometimes to go through the litany of what they can't do.
hmm
And when I turn it to, okay, well, let's back it up. What can they do?
Yeah.
What's their entry point? Where do we have to back that wagon up for that kid to get on and feel success? Because when we do that, then there's going to be more joy and there's going to be more engagement and there's going to be more excitement. Um, the first big thing about decentering that I talked about and I write about is really building um, your professional community, like who you learn from.
hmm
And Zaretta Hammond has been an amazing resource for me. I did her PLC last year, and she had webinar after webinar, but it also went along with culturally responsive teaching in the brain. And I think that there is a huge amount to think about and talk about when it comes to the dopamine surge of getting something and figuring it out. Like that feeling that you have when you figure out an answer to a puzzle, or you get the right response, or somebody says, yes, I see you, I hear you, and whoa, this is an important piece of writing.
Mm,
um, Not the how many words did you misspell and how can I
yeah.
teach you how to fix that.
Yeah.
um, as opposed to the 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 chemistry of the brain that happens when you're in a fight or flight mode,
Hmm.
and the difficulty in learning when you're worried and tense and afraid. And I want to make sure that that's not the situation for kids, and coming at it and getting teachers to come at it from a what can they do
Yeah.
point of view changes that playing field a bit.
My friend Dina, thank you, Dina, for joining us. Says, okay, what can the kid do? Awesome
Yeah,
approach. Yeah.
what can they do?
What can they do? Okay. So how does that, when it comes to giving student feedback, what are some of the coaching strategies that you might provide in these type of situations? Okay. Cause I know when I remember as a kid, and we see that all that red ink on our papers, and the like I worked hard on this paper and then I get it back and it's nothing but a bunch of red marks. When we're thinking from an asset approach, when we're thinking about the positive side of things, are there some ways that we can give some assessments or feedback from those assessments that can encourage our students a little bit more in these type of situations?
I will tell you that the number one post onto writing teachers in terms of hits, and it's a
Uh-huh.
big number, was a post about why you don't write on kids writing.
Okay.
So, um, but again, the more that I can teach teachers the progression of writing skills,
Mhm.
the more then they can, number one, identify where the kid is in a progression, and then teach into the next step. So again, they can feel that success.
Mhm.
Like if we talked a little bit backstage about yoga and yoga being a
Yeah.
practice, right? And if I said to you, I want you to stand up and bend down and put your palms on the floor, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do that? You'd quit. You'd be like, forget it. I'm not doing it unless there's things that I don't know about you and you're really a yogi, and that would be something that's easy for you. You could do it. Like, can you do that?
Was that downward dog? That's what it sounds like.
Legs straight, legs
Legs straight.
straight, stand up, bend down, put your palms on the floor, keep your legs straight.
Oh no, that's not happening.
Right.
And I go to the gym and I've been working on stretching, but yeah, I've never been able to touch my toes. So
Right,
I know I can't
you'd be
palms
like,
down.
"Forget it, I'm not
Yeah.
doing that." Whereas if I built that up for you, and I realize that right now you are somebody who can bend down and touch your shins,
Mhm.
then I'll work on getting your fingertips to the floor,
Yeah.
and that will be an exciting moment for you when you get your fingertips to the floor, and we can celebrate it. So don't ask a kid who's trying to get first sounds of letters to write a paragraph, because that's just an exercise in frustration.
Mhm.
Like, instead, have him draw pictures and work on labeling those pictures so that he can feel excited and talk about writing and feel like he did something and created something. Um, and I
But
think
everybody else, this is a standard. They're all supposed to be able to write this paragraph. So what, I need to make sure that they're doing it as well at the same pace as all the other students. How do you respond to that?
you're putting me in coaching mode. In much the same way that I just did with the yoga stretching.
Yeah.
Like, you will make progress if I start you with your fingertips to your ankles.
Uh-huh.
You won't make progress if I tell you to put your palms on the floor and you get
Mhm.
mad and frustrated and feel unsafe and want to quit.
Yeah.
So, how can I make a situation feel safe and give you opportunities to feel that dopamine rush of success, by finding that magic spot where you struggle just a little bit, enough to make growth, maybe with a little bit of support and a little bit of scaffolding that I have a plan to remove.
Okay.
So if I can do that and I can find that magic spot, then I'm doing my job. And if I can teach teachers to know to look for that spot, then they're going to be able to do their job better and really get those kids engaged and excited about learning.
All right, thank you, Melanie. I put you on coach mode so you can send me a bill later. That's totally fine. Send me your invoice. Dina says writing is definitely a progression, and oftentimes teachers want to make a writing task an endpoint rather than one piece in the journey as a writer. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Melanie?
I think that there's a lot of push for a product when it
Mhm.
comes to writing. And there's a lot of interest in correction and having things be perfect and right. Um, and it's better if we can get into the mindset. I just used we. It's better if I can get into the mindset. It's better if I can inspire the people around me to get into the mindset of writing being a process.
Hmm.
So if I can get them into that mindset, then I can push them into better understanding the steps to make people better writers. Um, One of the things that I talk about in my first book more than in any other are the different parts of writing and the different things that are involved in it. And there's the whole element of thinking of ideas and finding the worth in the moments of life and understanding what you're knowledgeable about and wanting to share them.
Hmm.
Like there's all that I can think of an idea and have a bank of them. And you might have perfect spellers who can't think of ideas, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and in some ways, I'll take the kid who can come up with ideas over the kid who's got the perfect spelling any
sure.
day. Like I've got editors who can get through the spelling, but if they can't think of like the idea that makes me want to go, oh my gosh, tell me more, then you know, I'm bored. Like, okay, I can read your piece, but I don't care about it.
Hmm.
Um, I want the kid who can tell a good story,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I will work really hard to give them the tools that they need, whether it's drawing or pictures or figuring out different ways to say it in order for them to have their voice heard in the world.
I hear you. I hear you. So Melanie, it has truly been an honor to have you on. Um, Going live,
Honored to be on, Sheldon. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do. In all seriousness, thank you for all you do and what you give to the community, because you have been part of my practice and part of my journey in trying to do this work better. So, in all seriousness and appreciation and gratitude, you've helped my journey a lot.
Well, that means a lot. That means a lot. It's a lot of work, but I enjoy this work. It is very. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm always wanting to learn more. Like I wrote down, diverse versus inclusive. Like I wrote it down because I want to do some further research on it. I might even have a reach out to someone if I find an article or some journals. I'll probably
Share them
try to get
back
them
with
on the
me.
show.
Yeah.
I'll try to get them on the show and just talk to them about it and just so I can share it to everyone as a podcast so that's what I always try to do is like, okay, if I learn something new, if this helped me out, I want this to be shared with everyone else because I want everyone to have those tools and resources necessary. So um I would love for you to take us home if you have any final thoughts, anything that you want to add to the conversation.
I think that when we were thinking about the idea of decentering and thinking about really surrounding yourself with as many resources and tools and insights, there's so many resources and books that are out there to tap into. And I would
Yeah.
just say, do that. And don't ever think that the journey's over, because it's not. And you make growth and you think, okay, I'm a little bit better at this, but then it's like two steps forward and three steps back, and you're like, okay, I've still got work to do. And I think that the work to do is critically important. And the conversations that we are out there having, or that I am out there having, maybe at one time were uncomfortable and still can be sometimes, but I am appreciative of the thought that it's not uncomfortable as much as unpracticed. And the more that I can engage in those conversations and think about my own practice and push myself so that I can be a better educator for all kids. I think the better for everybody, no matter who's sitting in the classroom and who's looking to do the work. So
That's right. Nice. I like that. If we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
Probably the most inclusive place to find me is at melaniemeehan.com, because that will have where to find me on Two Writing Teachers, where to find me on Twitter. Twitter I'm the fastest at, so that's why I put it in my name there. I'm at Melanie Meehan 1.
Make sure you're following Melanie, by the way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
It's okay. I'll share my space. I want you. I'm happy to have you sharing my space. So,
Okay.
yeah, that would be a great way. And I'd also just again say to people, Two Writing Teachers hosts a Slice of Life on Tuesdays. And if anybody has any interest in nudging their own writing lives, we would welcome you.
Well, Melanie, it has been a pleasure. I'm glad you were able to join me live tonight. So thank you again for your time.
And I can't wait to have your book in my hands. So
me too. I can't wait to have.
I'm looking forward to that. I am looking forward to putting up some tweets and reviews about that book.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really do appreciate it. So it'll be out soon. But again, folks, Melanie Meehan is here. Again, thank you so much for your time. Make sure you're following her, by the way. Have a good evening.
Good night.
All right, that was Melanie. Trying to work out this mixer and talk at the same time. As we wrap things up today, it has been just really eye-opening. You know, I enjoy having conversations, especially when I have those opportunities to learn a little bit more and just really charge my thinking and just challenge my thinking rather about some of the terms that we use, some of the words that we like, the we statements, diverse books versus inclusive books. Those are some of the key takeaways that I had from today's conversation. So as always, remember the book is coming out, Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students, will be in your home in a few weeks if you order it now. And if you're wanting to be a part of the book club, shoot me an email and I will get you added on to the list as well. And I can also facilitate bulk orders as well. So if you want to purchase for your school or for your district or something like that, just shoot me an email. We can work all that out for you. I hope you have a great long weekend, holiday weekend. Be safe. I will be out on the grill. More than likely, I don't know what I'm going to be grilling, but I will be grilling something because it's 4th of July, and that is a tradition for myself, is always get on the grill. Anytime I have an excuse, I will jump on that thing. And so I'm hoping that the weather will be great because that's what I'll be doing. Remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. By all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice in leading equity.